5 seconds. Good morning and welcome to the Orange County School Board's Rule Development Workshop, which has been scheduled for today for the purpose of discussing School Board Policy JIC, the Code of Student Conduct. Board members are attending in person or telephonically, with the exception of Member Castor-Dental, who will not be joining us this morning. So I'd like to take roll call. Let me start with Member Gallo.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good morning. Member Lopez.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning. Member Cobert.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Vice Chair Gould. I'll come back to Vice Chair Gould in just a minute. Member Felder.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Member Byrd.
Good morning.
And, of course, I'm present. Let me ask again, Member Gould, are you present? Okay. Dr. Jenkins, if you or Ms. Emval hear from Member Gould some point in the meeting, let me know so that I can recognize her and the minutes can reflect her attendance when
We
when
will,
it
Madam Chair. She
happens.
told me she might be slightly delayed.
Okay, no problem. I just want the minutes to reflect when she joins us if possible. I also want to remind the board and the public that the board will not be engaging in electronic outside communication or digital communication during this meeting or our regular meetings, so that we can focus our attention on the business in front of us. And to my fellow board members and staff members who will be speaking today, please make sure that your microphone is turned on and you speak directly into it, so that both our audience here in the chambers as well as YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. And now we'll begin with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we are not taking public comments. I don't think we have any members of the public here. Anyway, but because this is, go ahead.
It is a rule development workshop, but we do not have any we don't have any callers or any public speakers.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I meant our general public comments as opposed to those
Right,
devoted
right.
to this subject. So just in case there was anybody that was either calling in and wanted to just give general comments other than what's on the agenda. So we have no callers for what's in front of the board today, and no public speakers in the audience. So let me then move on to Dr. Jenkins. Dr. Jenkins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have this specific rule development workshop because of the governor signing new statutory language that impacts our Code of Student Conduct, and because we are 3 weeks away from the start of about 3 weeks away from the start of school, we need to take care of that today to follow the appropriate timeline. And so we will be having a very brief meeting to share minimal adjustments to your Code of Student Conduct.
Thank you. And before we move on, let me just ask for, I am expecting a rather urgent phone call. I don't know if it will come in during this meeting. And so what I'd like to do is appoint somebody or elect somebody to serve as acting vice chair. And my thinking is, Member Byrd, you had the privilege of doing that last time. Member Felder, you're our newest member, so I thought maybe Member Lopez, would you be willing to do that for this meeting? I hope not to have to leave, but I would rather, if I jump up to take a call, have some order here. So we good with that? Do we need to take a vote, or is the board comfortable with that? Okay, great, okay. You know what that means, Member Felder, right? It means you are next in line. The next time we don't have one of our immediate past vice chairs, you're it. Let's hope it's not a cantankerous meeting, huh? And Dr. Jenkins, did you have follow-up comment on that?
Madam Chair, I was going to mention Member Cobert is online. She's lacking audio for some reason, but she texted and said she can hear us. We just can't hear her.
Okay, so Member Cobert is with us. Member Gould was the one we hadn't heard from yet. Have we heard from Member Gould yet? Okay. Member Colbert did weigh in, so Dr. Jenkins, you'll let us know if she texts something that we need to be aware of. Thank you so much. Now, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. This is very loud, sorry. Good morning. We're here today to go over JIC, Code of Student Conduct. The policy itself will not be changing, but the policy does adopt the code handbook that goes to students and parents, and so that will be where we see the minimal revisions. As Dr. Jenkins had just mentioned, the reason we're coming back for this amendment is due to Senate Bill 590, which was signed, and there are 2 additional requirements that we are required to add into our code. The first being a criteria for recommending to law enforcement that a student who commits a criminal offense be allowed to participate in a civil citation or similar pre-arrest diversion program as an alternative to expulsion or arrest. And the second being criteria for assigning a student who commits a petty act of misconduct to a school-based intervention program. So I'm going to go over those changes, and then we also have a couple other additions that we changed as well as we were reviewing the new Cessor rule that was recently adopted on July 14th. So I will begin now. The agenda today is an overview, timeline, summary of actions, proposed revisions, next steps, then questions and discussion. The purpose of the revisions of this policy is as follows: to assure compliance with all applicable federal, state laws, Florida State Board of Education rules, board policies, administrative rules, procedures, and guidelines. For this amendment, we were at Cabinet yesterday, July 19th. We are here today at a rule development workshop. If it goes through today, we'll have board approval August 3rd, hopefully, and then the effective date will be August 10th, 2021, which is the first day of the school year. The purpose of this revision is to authorize procedures for student behavior and disciplinary actions and to include legislative and statutory updates. Revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits that are consistent with statutory language to the extent possible. The first revision is going to fall under Section 3, Student Notifications, and it's entitled Consultation with Law Enforcement. And this, of course, is in compliance with the Senate Bill 590. The new language will read, Section 1006.13 Florida Statutes and Board Policy JIC, titled Code of Student Conduct, requires OCPS employees to consult with the school resource officer, or SRO, or law enforcement officer if the SRO is not available, when a reasonable person believes a crime has occurred within the board's jurisdiction or when there is a threat to school safety. If a crime committed by a student is deemed as an eligible misdemeanor offense authorized under Section 985.12 Florida statutes, the school principal or designee may recommend that the student be allowed to participate in a civil citation or similar pre-arrest diversion program as an alternative to arrest or full expulsion. The final determination of whether the SRO or law enforcement officer will issue a civil citation or pre-arrest diversion program rests solely with the SRO or law enforcement officer and does not exempt the student from receiving other forms of discipline interventions from the school. This recommendation cannot be made for certain offenses, which includes, but is not limited to, the following: felonies, threats to the school, and possession use of a firearm or weapon. Just a quick note, the civil citation programs used locally are for misdemeanor or lower offenses, so it's going to be things such as possession of drug paraphernalia or a very low amount of cannabis, things like that. So it's not going to be majority of our level 4 offenses. The second change will be also in Section 3 under student notifications, and this is that second criteria that we were required to establish. It will be entitled Petty Acts of Misconduct, and this is also to comply with Senate Bill 590, and it would read, Board Policy JIC, titled Code of Student Conduct, defines petty acts of misconduct as acts that do not pose a threat to school safety or the safety of others and are not considered a crime under federal or state statutes. The principal or designee may assign a student who commits a single petty act of misconduct to a school-based intervention program as permitted in Section 4 and Section 5 of this code. And Section 4 and Section 5 are where the offenses are detailed, and principals do have an extensive list of consequences that they could choose from when assigning a discipline consequence. And the school-based intervention is going to be things such as PASS or counseling, restorative justice, things like that. This next change is to align with Cessor. So Cessor did change their definition slightly. You'll see our current definition there that's listed in the code, and then on the revisions to the policy, the underlined portions are the sections that we are adding. So to align with Cessor here, we have an actual or intentional touching or striking of a student, OCPS employee, contracted personnel, or volunteer against his or her will, causing more serious injury, such as great bodily harm, permanent disfigurement, permanent disability, use of a deadly weapon, or where the attacker knew or should have known the victim was pregnant. In addition, you'll see under 4D where it says use of a deadly weapon, we wanted to clarify 4D battery, 4H, and 4K. So 4H is your firearms and weapons, and 4K is other dangerous objects. So I'll go through those in just a moment, but use of a weapon is going to fall under a 4D. So we also added in that language at the bottom that says this section includes the actual use of a weapon, firearm, or other dangerous object as defined under level 4H and level 4K. For the level 4H, firearms and weapons, we're recommending a change to the title just to really clarify that a 4H is for possession, not necessarily for use. So there's that recommended change there. And then the definition, as you can see again, the underlined sections would be where we add in additional information. Just to note, Cessor did add in this year Chapter 790 Florida statutes. We already had that in our definition, so Cessor's were already in compliance with it, so we didn't have to change that. But they did add in inflict serious harm on another person or places a person in a reasonable fear of serious harm. So we already had use or attempted use. We did remove use since that will now fall under a 4D battery. If it's attempted, it's a 4H, firearms, weapons. If it's actual use, it's a 4D battery. 4K, again, as I just explained, we added in some clarifying language there, that the actual use of a dangerous object shall be coded as a level 4D, which is battery. The attempted use of a dangerous object shall be coded as a level 4H, which is firearms and weapons. Now moving on to the elementary section, which is section 5. For level 3J contraband, the definition is having, using, or giving to others things not allowed at school, such as matches, lighters, toy guns, butter knife, tools, etc. Last time we were here for the first revision, we talked a lot about butter knife, what the definition of that was, how some students may misinterpret that, what does it mean if they're just using it for lunch purposes. So because it was just listed as an example and to avoid confusion for the younger students, because they're going to be the ones that are reading this hopefully with their parents and also with their teachers, we're going to take butter knife out completely, but we did add information to our discipline procedures guide. So if a student is using a butter knife strictly for lunch purposes and they're in lunch and they come to a teacher or an employee and say, can you help me cut my apple? That actually they will not receive a discipline consequence for that. The butter knife will be, or spreader, or whichever, whatever the knife, the term is for the knife, will be confiscated from the student. The parent will be contacted, and then the parent will have to pick it up. Now, if the knife is being used in a threatening manner, or if the student is in possession of it outside of the lunchroom and using it in some sort of manner that's not used for eating purposes, then obviously they will be disciplined in accordance with the code. If it is a butter knife or blunt-bladed table knife, such as a spreader or something like that, that will be a level 3J contraband. Anything that's sharper then goes to a level 4. So if it's a steak knife or something along those lines that can cause more serious injury, it's going to rise to a level 4. Again, for the 4D, this just aligns with the secondary, so elementary is going to match what's in secondary for that, and it's just modifying the language there. More serious injury on purpose, such as great bodily harm, permanent harm, use of a deadly weapon, so we want to make sure those aligned. And then at the bottom there, this section includes the actual use of a weapon, firearm, or dangerous object as defined under level 4H and 4K. Again, we're proposing to change the title to firearms, weapons, possession. And then under 4H, removing the actual use and just saying that this section also includes trying to use an object that could be used to seriously harm another person or makes another person scared of being hurt. And again, those are more elementary friendly terms as opposed to the secondary language. Under the 4K, same thing as in secondary. The actual use of a dangerous object will be coded as a level 4D. The attempted use of a dangerous object will be coded as a 4H. The last revision that we are proposing falls under the IDEA procedures for students. And this was something that we had discussed with Cabinet previously. And when I asked if we were coming back for an amendment, if they would like me to make that change, that's why we're bringing it here today. But basically, the old sentence or the current sentence says any student who has been removed for more than 10 school days must receive appropriate services. The services provided during the removal may or may not be identical to the services on the child's IEP. We're recommending modifying that to make it more consistent with IDEA. And it says, any student who has been removed for more than 10 school days may receive appropriate services in accordance with their IEP. However, the manner in which the services are delivered may vary based on the student's discipline placement. So we're really trying to clarify the language there. Next step would be revisions to the internal procedures, which the area administrators are already working on this summer, and training for Orange County Public Schools employees regarding revisions to the policies and new procedures, which the area administrators will also provide this summer to deans and APs over discipline. Dr. Jenkins, that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kopesky. Chair, that is it for our presentation.
Thank you. That was wonderful presentation. I love the fact of having the citation is giving more opportunities for those students to be successful. So thank you so much for the presentation. If there are any questions from the board members?
Yeah.
Member Felder?
Felder, yes. Good morning. First of all, thank you. And this has been a long, tedious task for you all from way back. So I appreciate the work, and what I appreciate most is the clarification of the language, especially with elementary school children and high school. And I think that the way you have clarified and written these codes, that it should be very, very clear for parents to understand, even for children. And I am so glad that that section having to do with finding alternatives, fresh alternatives for those students who really misbehaving, in high school. I'm just hoping that the administrations will be able to find, the school-based administration will be able to find alternatives that'll work and that'll change will come about without you having to, put kids out of school. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Felder. We have Board Member Gallo online. She's next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for this great presentation. I do have a couple questions. The first one is in 590, it also had language surrounding notification to parents on threats to schools. And I didn't know how are we dealing with that part of the bill? Will that be incorporated in the Code of Student Conduct? Will that be done internally? How will we let the parents know about that?
So that will be actually contained in policy JICK, which is our threats policy. And then we have two sections within that policy on notifications to parents, or I apologize, well, within the policy and within the procedures guide. So in our procedures guide, we have notification for threats to others. So that would include threats to school. And then we also have procedures for threats of self-harm. So that is all encompassed within JICK and the threats procedure guide.
Oh, wonderful. So we don't need to make changes. We already made the changes to our policy to reflect 590?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, perfect. My next question is, if I may, Madam Chair.
Of course, go ahead.
The portal with the threat assessments, is that up and running, and are we using that?
So we have signed the user agreement as a district, and we met recently with the DOE, and they had recommended we start with a small group at a district level to figure out how the portal works and how we sign up for it, and then start adding in school by school. Currently, the portal is up, but it is not a repository for information. So right now, it's just a launch pad where it links to different sites. So if you are law enforcement and you go in through the portal, it's going to take you to the juvenile system or the criminal system database where you can then access that information. If you are a mental health designee and log into the portal, you can access Baker Act data. Same thing with education. You can go in and you can access student discipline through Cessor and things like that that have been reported by other counties.
Okay, thank you. So so it's not yet accepting information.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question is around the Cessor data. So I know that we are very conscious and we are very intentional when we fill out our Cessor data, and we send the Cessor data to the Department of Education. But in reviewing the Cessor data, and maybe this is a conversation that we need to have a workshop on later, it may not be appropriate for this workshop, but in reviewing the Cessor data and comparing us to other large districts like Miami-Dade, Broward, and Hillsborough, our incidences are higher than all three of the highest ranking or the highest populated counties in Florida. And so I'm wondering if it's the way we're reporting it. I'm trying to get an understanding if that is indicative of an issue that we have in Orange County, or are we coding things differently than other counties and their instances are much lower? Like Miami-Dade was so significantly lower than us that I was shocked.
So what I can speak for is Orange County Public Schools. I'm not sure about the other counties and their reporting. We did a major overhaul to our Cessor reporting a couple years ago and really aligned our referral to the Cessor codes. And so we try to accurately report everything that occurs on campus through the Cessor database. I know our area administrators are actively working on that, and they engage all the time with the Florida Department of Education. We have a contact there that they're constantly reaching out to and say, well, if we have this type of situation, how would that be coded? So I believe, in my opinion, that we are reporting as accurately as possible under the correct codes. I'm not sure what the other counties are doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Lopez, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. I'm sure it went fine, but when I saw that she had the gavel, I thought, uh-oh, something went wrong.
I just put it closer.
Okay, I was like, who got out of line in this room?
Madam Chair, just for the record, she did a wonderful job of calling on speakers and commending the presenter. She was about to adjourn your meeting.
Oh, okay. I looked around and I said, there's nobody but your cabinet in the room. Who did you have to gavel in this room? So, okay.
So thank you.
Please.
Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to say that I feel very proud to be part of this board and be part of the district. Having civil citation is gonna help us and it's gonna help our students, our communities, to reduce the pipeline from school to prison. And that is amazing. We're helping children and I know that we're setting an example to other counties as well. So I just want to say that I feel very honored, and thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Member Byrd.
I just want to quickly tell Sarah how thankful I am, as well as the other board members, for your hard work on this policy and our Code of Student Conduct book. I know how passionate you are about it and how how thoughtful you are about the revisions and how well you listen to us and what we want to see in it. And it's just great to have you working on it, and all the work you've done is just fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. And I actually can't take all the praise. I have to add in the area administrators too, because they sit with me. I'm not sure that they want to sit with me the whole time, but they do sit with me the whole time and go through it word by word and page by page. So it's definitely a team effort. Thank you very much for your kind words.
And Member Byrd, I want to echo your comments. Yeah, I have enjoyed working with you from day one. And I think we're all spending some time in a Harvard program with a lot of other school board members and superintendents across the nation. And every time I get a chance to do that, it makes me even more grateful for the incredible support that we have. Support isn't even the right word. I feel like our job is mostly to support you, but the wonderful working relationship that we have, Dr. Jenkins, with you, your superintendent, your cabinet, and the entire team. And so the quality of this team is amazing, but perhaps even better than the quality is the wonderful attitude and the great cooperation from the board. I mean, it's really, we are very, very fortunate. So, yeah. All right. Anything further that you need? Dr. Jenkins, we good? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Then before we adjourn the meeting, I do want to just give one quick update to the board. When we had our mask policy decision, I had made comments at the end that I wanted to monitor on a daily basis what's happening with the impact of COVID on our youth. As a board remembers, a significant part of our decision last year, we knew that the risk to our students was relatively low, but we also understood that our students lived in multi-generational families, that some parents would be afraid to send their children into school for fear that they would come home and infect the rest of the household, and there was no vaccine. So in my mind, having a vaccine is a significant change to the equation because the adults in our children's lives have options now. What has concerned me is that the Delta variant or some other variant at some point may be more threatening to our children than what we've seen in the past, more like a traditional flu. And if that were the case, that was one of the reasons I think we all felt that we needed to have the flexibility to reimpose the mask requirement on our students depending on what we see. I reached out to Dr. Pino over the weekend. He has been wonderful. I want to say that at the outset. You all know it. I don't need to say it, but I do need to say it because I don't want anybody to misinterpret this. He's been very supportive of this school district. I couldn't be more pleased with his responsiveness. But I had asked him for if he had access to some data that I thought would be helpful. The number of hospitalization rates for our school-age children now versus last year. Number of deaths, not a great measurement because there's more to COVID than just dying, but I know that's data that at least I know the state collects. Real-time information that this board could look at on a regular basis so that we could determine if we need to change course. Unfortunately, he was not able to provide any of the specific information that I requested. So we're going back and forth, trying to figure out what data might be out there that we could monitor. So I reached out to Orlando Health yesterday, realizing that I thought one of the really helpful things would be hospitalization. That's an indicator. I don't want to wait until we see potentially children dying to know that we have a problem. And I thought if I could find out what we might be able to get, and we have a great relationship with Advent Health as well. I just happened to have, somebody that I know at Orlando Health that made it easier for me to contact yesterday evening. And they're looking at, and they're going to get back to me and let me know if they'll be able to provide us with data on our school age hospitalization rates and compare that to last year. if they're able to do that, whatever type of data that they can provide, I would imagine that we could ask Advent Health and Nemours for that as well. And I think with that information, we will be better prepared to decide if we can stay the course where we are. I do have a few questions about how we're going to operate, and I'll talk to the superintendent offline about that. But there are things that there's pros and cons that keep going through my mind. One is that even last year, our students, when they were in the cafeteria having lunch, they didn't have their masks on. But last year we did have the ability, because about half our population wasn't in school, we had the ability to spread our students out. Now that we've lost that launch ed option because of a state decision, we will not be able to space our students out sufficiently to probably have that 3-foot separation in the cafeteria, which means that probably no matter what we do, there's going to be a window of time when the disease, the infection is more transmissible, because the students will have their mask off. None of us eat with our masks on. So I'll meet with the superintendent and talk about whether there are any other things that we might do to either mitigate the impact or be able to track any potential spread. And I think it would be good at some point for us to probably have just an update as a board in terms of, Dr. Jenkins, what the plan is for this year, given the very different environment we're in. So I just wanted to share that with you all. And we'll all stay in touch on a regular basis on this. Dr. Jenkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are actually developing an FAQ, so parents will have constant updates about what next year looks like, and we'll certainly give the board updates. Let me speak to cafeterias quickly. We were almost at 80% by the time school ended, so our cafeterias are pretty close contact last year. What we do have in place, what we did last year and we will continue to have in place, are seating charts for the cafeteria.
Wonderful.
That helps with contact tracing. Our high schooler, that's a bit more of a challenge. We are working on some potential solutions there. But elementary and middle school, we feel pretty confident we can continue the seating charts for
That's
our
wonderful.
children.
Yeah.
But we'll keep you posted. Questions come up from day to day, and we are going to make sure we start compiling and have a rolling FAQ, if you will.
Great. Yeah, I had wondered about whether that would be feasible to have a seating chart, but that will certainly help us. At the high school level, while I recognize it is a very personal decision for parents about vaccination, but vaccination is an option, I don't take that lightly. I think all the time, if I had school-age children, the decision for me is a lot easier than the decision I would make for my children. And unfortunately, I don't think there's any right answer on that decision. One, unequivocal, there's risk to both. I know how I feel on this. I personally think that I would vaccinate my children, but I respect and appreciate how difficult that decision is. But I do think there is a difference with our high school students who do have that option and our 0 to 12 who don't. And that's what continues to, frankly, keep me up at night. And I think it should keep us all up at night, because very few people run for the school board ever thinking that they would have this much responsibility. And getting data and trying to rely on data based on articles that you find online. I'm spending a lot of time there, but I also have almost no way to fact check everything I see. So I really want us, again, to look to maybe our hospital partners and Dr. Pino, any information that he can provide us so that we can stay informed and be nimble. That's going to be, like it was last year, going to be an important word, I think, for all of us this year. Any comments or input from the board? Member Felder, you're recognized.
I just want to say thank you all so much, especially our superintendent and the board, how we have really seriously, because I came in when you all were in the middle of this pandemic madness. But my only point I'd like to make is that people are going to have to remain honest about the disease, the sickness. They're going to be honest about whether or not they've been vaccinated, honest about whether or not they're in some kind of situation where they have a 2-week period. And I think if people remain with integrity, we'll be able to get through this, because you just got to be honest. If you're sick Have you been exposed to people that are sick? And if you are exposed, you need to do what's appropriate, mask yourself up or what have you. But again, I'm going to close with this. My concern has been with the children because they have to do what their parents direct them to do. So, but I think if you keep an honest policy, we'll get through this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Member Lopez.
I would like to know more feedback in terms of the buses,
Of the, pardon me, I'm sorry.
with buses, with the, what is the logistic, when they are in the bus?
Thank you. Dr. Jenkins.
Certainly. Let me go back for a second to cafeteria. So last year, seating charts were for elementary age students, secondary students, free for all. Hard to contain them when they have lunch shifts. When it comes to buses, we tried to separate children. Once we were almost at 80% capacity, that went out the window. But we did keep the windows open for ventilation on the buses. And of course, they had to wear a mask on the buses. The board's admonition to families is if your child's not been vaccinated, consider putting a mask on them in school and on the school bus. And so we would encourage that still. But when we were at about 80%, Member Lopez, we had to stop trying to have children one per seat. We couldn't accommodate that anymore. But we kept the ventilation, the windows open to help with ventilation.
Follow up on Member Lopez's question. Will we keep the windows open this year?
Yes.
Great, okay. I was hoping that does make a significant difference in terms of
Gotta keep.
keeping the air particles blowing around and blowing out. Ms. Enval.
Madam Chair, Member Cobert would like to say something.
Thank you. Member Cobert, welcome.
Good morning. Quick sound check, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you wonderfully. Thank you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the ongoing conversation about this as I've tried to reassure the public that this is an ongoing situation that we continue to monitor on a daily basis. My question for the superintendent is, what is our plan should there be an outbreak or a required quarantine of a classroom, a grade, or and even school without the opportunity for launch ed? How will we handle those students who might need to stay at home for a period of time?
Great question.
you.
Dr. Jenkins?
So the plan is if, of course, the Department of Health will be dictating any contact tracing and any quarantine. Some of their provisions, I believe, as in other counties, will ask individuals to voluntarily consent to disclosing vaccination status because that will impact your quarantine. And so we think folks, given the possibility of a quarantine, will probably be very willing to disclose that they've been vaccinated. When it comes to the pivot, we will have similar provisions. Although we don't have Launch Ed as a platform, we will have the capacity, should we need to, for a school to pivot to digital learning or for an entire classroom. What we are not planning on is any individual hybrid situations. If a child has to be out and there are only 3 or 4 students out in a classroom, we would treat them like we would if they had the flu. Get your assignments, be in touch with your teacher, you're at home until you return to school.
Great answer. Member Cobert, follow up?
No, that's
Okay,
very
thank you.
helpful.
So, Dr. Jenkins, boy, we talk about not blindsiding anybody, and I'm certainly not trying to do that, but do you think it is possible for you to give the board kind of an update, because we don't have all board members here, and this isn't a time when the public is necessarily paying attention, for those operating decisions that you all have thought through, so that similar to we did last year, we got parents that have to make a decision by the end of this month. I don't envy them that, because unfortunately what we've told them is we can't guarantee you your children won't wear masks, and we can't guarantee you that your children will be required to wear masks. So I do recognize the difficulty. I think the more that we can communicate to the board members and through this forum, including your facts, your frequently asked questions, probably be beneficial. One of the things when Member Cobert asked that question, it made me think in terms of when we might reinstate, under what circumstances we might reinstate masks might be in a quarantine situation also. So we have a little time, but could we do that next Tuesday, which I know is very short notice, but it's our last meeting before the deadline.
I would be happy to bring my report
Okay,
of
great.
everything that we have, but I want to assure you, we're going to be putting it out before next Tuesday.
Oh, great. Okay, wonderful.
And then
Oh,
I'll
I'm
just
thrilled to
summarize
hear
it in
that.
my report as well. Yeah, we want to keep the FAQs going because parents are
Right.
anxious and they need to have at least the answers that we have available now.
Absolutely. And
And-
that way, if we have additional questions that come up,
Mhm.
we communicate them. Please, everybody, communicate them to the superintendent ahead of time,
Mhm.
because the purpose of next week is to have answers to questions. And that way, if there's anything new that develops that we hear from parents, we can try to accomplish that as well in a public forum where we can discuss kind of our thought process, and try to give the public, give our parents as much information as we have available to us.
Absolutely. We'll make that my report. Member
Great.
Gallo is cued in.
Great. Member Gallo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think what I wanted, the questions that I had have already been asked and answered, so thank you for that. But I do want to thank you for continuing this conversation. I have the same concerns you do and the same questions, and it is extremely hard to fact check everything that comes into our inbox. And we are trying to do due diligence to make sure that, everybody that attends our schools are as safe as possible without infringing on the rights of others. So this is just a tough situation to be in. So I appreciate the
Absolutely.
ongoing conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Member Gallo. Any other comments from board members? Member Byrd?
Thank you, Chair. I too am very thankful for you continuing this conversation. One thing that maybe you could touch on when you do your update, Superintendent, is our strategies around our high-risk students. That's a huge concern for parents of children that have pretty serious health risks and that are in our ESE population who really need to be back in school, obviously, to receive all their services, but they're really scared to bring them back with unvaccinated, unmasked kids. So if we could just kind of discuss that a little bit, so we could find out any ways we can reassure those parents, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Along those same lines, as parents have asked me if they send their children in with a note saying my child needs to wear a mask, will we enforce that? Enforcing is a strong word, but it would be helpful to know whether or not there can be direct communication, but the parents can expect direct communication back from the teacher if they have a medically necessary reason for their child to have a mask. So we'll have that conversation next week. But
Actually, we already published
Okay.
that answer to a
Okay.
couple of folks who were
Okay.
asking it, that we can't mandate, we can't ask a teacher, unless the board puts in place a mandatory mask policy, you can't ask teachers to enforce a parent's individual request. Legal already weighed in on that.
okay, even if it comes with a doctor's order similar to a doctor's order for insulin, and a child refuses to get an insulin injection.
So
We-
that wasn't the question.
Yeah.
Amy said they'll have to weigh in
Yeah.
on medical
Yeah.
requirements.
Right.
That would be different. But the general question of, I want my child to wear a mask,
Yeah.
will the teacher make him keep it on? The answer was no.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and nobody is going to ask a teacher to hold a child down and try to put a mask on them. Or if my insulin question being the same thing, I mean, if a child went to get their insulin injection and refused to get it, we wouldn't be running around chasing them either. But in that circumstance, we would most likely be calling the parent and sending the child home. So I'm thinking there may be situations like some of our ESE students where it might warrant a more closer communication with the parent on so that it's not an ongoing problem. But anyway, there will be time to talk about that between now and next week, and then we can make sure that we've got the most complete and accurate answers. Ms. Enval.
I was just going to weigh in that we can look at the individual health plans of those
Yeah.
particular students if those are medical recommendations.
Okay.
From the physician.
Okay.
But those be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Got it. Yes. Thank you. All right, nothing else for the board, then this meeting is adjourned.